Hi, everybody. We're just letting everybody join us now. We'll get started in just a moment, so bear with us. Afternoon, everyone. Just sit tight. We're letting everybody join from their computers at the moment. Once we get to a decent number, we'll get started, so just bear with us. All right, well, welcome everyone to the fourth of our 6 events under our Elevate Your Career Next Level virtual event series. My name is Josh Shapiro, and I'm privileged to serve as the Director of Alumni Engagement for the UConn Foundation. I'm joined, as always, by my 2 colleagues, Elissa Kelly, Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, as well as Kate Krause, Director of Alumni Relations for the School of Engineering. We're going to be your points of contact today, should you need anything, and we'll attempt to serve you as best as we can as your technical assistants. As many of you know, normally our Elevate monthly event series features in-person events that are around the country, but like everywhere else and everything else this year, it's just not possible. So we bring you today our 4th installment in an adapted way of our Elevate Career Series. Today we'll be featuring a panel of rock star Huskies who have made a name for themselves in the sports and recreation industry, and they will do their best today to give you a window into their worlds, what it's like to work in these industries pre-COVID, and of course, amidst the global pandemic that we're all experiencing today. And hopefully shed some answers and some light into any questions that you might have about finding your way into this industry or just about learning more about how these folks operate and what they do. Before we jump in today, just a couple of housekeeping items as we usually do. First, the chat is open, so feel free to jump in there. If you want to make connections with your fellow Huskies, throw your LinkedIn profile in there, engage one another. This is the opportunity, and obviously without in-person events, it's very hard to make new connections. So take this opportunity to connect with each other and build your network. Next, as we have learned from other sessions that we've hosted, we encourage you to drop where you're logging in from. What you'll find from the panel today is they are scattered across the country today, just like yourselves. So we are interested in learning where you all are coming in from today. So if you want to drop that in there and let us know where you're logging in from, we'd appreciate that as well. Next, Elissa, Kate, and I will be monitoring the chat as well. So we'll be chiming in from time to time. So if there's anything you need, you can feel free to drop it in there or send us a direct message on there. We'll be happy to help along the way. And as you are thinking about engaging with our panel today, we encourage you to use the Q&A specific section under your Zoom toolbar to ask any of those questions. That way, our moderator today can monitor one stream of chat and make sure that everything kind of is in a formulated way, and he can answer all questions that come in today. Last, I would encourage all of you to check out all of your local Facebook groups through our alumni office. We have 27 regional groups throughout the country, so make sure that you are checking out where you might have some Husky activity. Granted, in-person events are still on hold for the time being, but you'll know who you have to connect with and start making some of those connections along the way. So definitely check that out on Facebook and see where you might have some fellow Huskies in your area. Now, moving back to our today's session, our moderator today is no rookie when it comes to career conversations with UConn Huskies. Many of you may recognize Mr. Brady from his travels with us across the country over the last few years, either leading a workshop or moderating a similar discussion within his role with us here at the Foundation as our preferred resource for career and management consulting. We're thrilled to welcome John back today as the moderator for today's discussion. Really quickly, his bio for all of you to know his background. John, or JB as most of his friends call him, is an executive coach. He's keynote speaker and frequent media source on matters related to corporate and career performance. Mr. Brady's current and recent clients span the US and the United Kingdom, including senior managers and executives of Goldman Sachs, General Electric, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Apple, Shell, Aramark, Hess, Southwest Airlines, AstraZeneca, Comcast, IBM, UBS, Thomson Reuters, and in the United States federal government as well. Mr. Brady is a veteran of more than 25 years in the education, banking, and technology sectors, and has experience growing the talent and top line revenue of startups, family-owned businesses, nonprofits, as well as Fortune 50 companies. Holds a Bachelor of Science degree in English education, as well as a Master of Education degree in leadership, training, and policy studies, both from the Education School at Boston University. He also holds an MBA with concentrations in marketing and international business from the Olin Graduate School at Babson College, which also recognized him as a distinguished alumnus in 2006. And he currently resides in ice and snow-covered Texas, where he is dialing in from. We hope John will be with us for the majority of today's workshop. Obviously, with rolling blackouts in the state of Texas, we know that that's a definite possibility we might lose you, John. But welcome back. This certainly is a different roadshow than we're used to, but glad to see you here and hope you're staying warm throughout all of this.
So far, so good. Thanks, Josh, and hopefully the infrastructure will hold. But we call audibles. We've done it before. We'll do it again if need be. I just ask everybody to sort of indulge with their best of patience through all of this. This is every time we think we've seen it all in the last year or two, we see more. So this is I guess a perfect theme given our topic. I also hope that my panelists won't mind if I jump around a little bit on the bios. These are, as Josh said, people who really are rock stars. These are folks who have done an incredible amount of work. They've had incredible impact, regardless of whether they're still early or mid-career. And I could spend a lot of time just reading all of these. So I'm just going to jump around so that we can get in kind of the substance of the conversation. And I hope I won't offend anybody by doing so. First, David Abelees. David and I have chatted once before for a similar event back when we were all still doing live and in-person events. David is a proven and probably one of the most visible leaders in the sports industry. He's the CEO at TaylorMade Golf. His career, at least in the executive space, spans back to 1998. So he's been at this a little while. Currently, after jumping in and out at TaylorMade, getting an opportunity to rotate his experience a little bit when TaylorMade was acquired by KPS Capital, which was one of the premier venture capital firms. They brought him back, and he's been doing a lot of pivoting and a lot of changing, not just in the last year, but even before, really influencing the culture there. Prior to his current post, David served for 15 years as general manager for Asia Pacific, North America, and a brand president within the company. David also spent 2 years away from the company as a CEO once before at San Diego-based Competitor Group, a live event and media company in the endurance sports industry. David currently serves on the board of directors, of course, at TaylorMade Golf, National Golf Foundation, San Diego Sports Innovators, and in an advisory board capacity for Newport, California-based venture firm Innovate Partners. David has a degree from UConn, of course, the School of Business, and currently lives in Del Mar, California, which is having much better weather than I am here with his wife and 3 sons. Erica Diesel is also with us. Erica is the Senior Director of NCAA Partnerships for Turner Sports at Warner Media. Currently in her 9th year, with Turner. Erica and her team across the joint venture, which I'll ask her to talk about in a little bit, with CBS Sports Network and the NCAA's corporate champions and partners to develop, manage, and execute multi-platform partnerships via brand integration, marketing rights, television, digital, social, and on-site activation, as well as hospitality, all areas very much impacted over the course of the last year for a variety of reasons, COVID-19 most notably. While the crown jewel of this partnership program, of course, remains the men's D1 basketball tournament, also known as March Madness. Erica and her team manage rights and activation year-round for all 90 NCAA championships. Prior to her time at Turner, Erica spent time at Group M in their entertainment sports partnership division, managing the Xerox partnership for the US Open tennis tournament. And prior to that, spent 5 years managing corporate partnership for the New York Rangers, Knicks, and Liberty at Madison Square Garden. She got her bachelor's degree in marketing from, of course, UConn, and her master's in sports marketing and media from NYU. She's currently living in Westchester with probably what is the most impressive of her titles, the parent of twins, Madeline and Bo. So for those of you who are struggling with childcare and learning from home with your children, imagine doing it with twins or triplets. I know a few of those families as well. Taylor Kapinski Rogers is currently Director of Communications for the National Football League, the NFL, which just managed to complete its season. And we were joking just a little bit before we, no pun intended, kicked things off. Personally, as a big football fan, I did not think we were going to make it all the way to the Super Bowl, but we did. It was really a great season. Taylor has done also a tremendous amount in the early part of her career, everything from her, as I read it, volunteer time with the NFL's Japan USO tour, which is just pretty cool, but also had rotations and times with the Boston Celtics, Cleveland Cavaliers, worked as a public relations assistant for the NFL, went back to the NBA as communications coordinator for the Celtics, and then back to the league, back to the NFL, media relations manager, and as I mentioned now, director of communications. So working with the media, working with the press, credentialing, especially at all of the big events, whether it's Pro Bowl, Super Bowl, and certainly this Super Bowl was unlike any other. So Taylor, welcome. And because I went alphabetically last, but most certainly not least, Mr. Shapiro. David Shapiro is the Executive Vice President and General Counsel for Vail Resorts. David also, and I also spoke last year, back when we were still doing live events out in Denver. Vail Resorts, currently a publicly traded company, 55,000 employees, owns and operates 37 ski resorts, which was a number I got incorrect last year. 37 ski resorts across 15 states and 3 countries. David oversees a department of about 150 of those 55,000 folks and has executive responsibility for all of the legal affairs of the company, government and community relations, and philanthropy, internal audit, compliance, and Vail Resorts' widely recognized sustainability program, which I know from another conversation with him is something that Vail Resorts shares with other industry insiders and even competitors as friendly competition, recognizing the importance of the world that we all share. He might even hit on that if it seems applicable to the conversation. David previously had positions as Senior VP and General Counsel at DaVita Kidney Care in Denver, and several other roles, including his 8 years there at DaVita, including Chief Compliance Officer and Chief Special Counsel. Before that, David was in private practice at firms in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Connecticut. David's also proudly served for 4 years as a trial attorney with the civil fraud section of the U.S. Department of Justice in D.C. So said more succinctly, this is a guy who's worked in consulting, in private practice, in government as a prosecutor, in-house counsel, and now at Vail Resorts, everything. So David has his BA in economics from Trinity College in Hartford, worked for Anderson Consulting for some time, and got his JD at UConn Law School. He was also a participant in moot court and was editor for the Connecticut Law Review, all while enjoying, of course, a lot of basketball games. David grew up in Newington, Connecticut, and his parents are still there, so can still go back to his roots. David has served on the board of directors and chaired the audit committee for Rural Metro Corporation, which was a national ambulance and fire services provider before they were acquired. And he's also served on a whole bunch of community and civic boards, which includes Children's Hospital Colorado and Denver Public Schools Foundation. He's currently a board member for the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, and David and his wife live in Denver with their 2 children. And from what I understand last year, they, appropriately enough, just love to ski. So he's in the right line of work at the right place and living in the right place. So with all of that, for anything I skipped, again, I hope I didn't offend anybody, but we're off to the races. So David Abeles, I'm going to start with you just because you and I have talked once before, which means I got to do my homework once before. And one of the things that's probably that I most remember, there were a few quotes, if you remember, I had dug out from hearing old podcasts and interviews that you had done. And I laid this quote down on you, so I will again. You had said, "I live with a paranoia about complacency." Well, then comes 2020 and 2021. So I'm imagining that whatever you've attempted to inject since your return as CEO of TaylorMade into the culture of the talent there, about the just fluidity of the business environment and everything else, hopefully has paid dividends. And anyone who didn't get it before, I'm guessing they probably get it now. But there was definitely a point, not maybe weeks after you and I got together last year, where even though we had been hearing about this coronavirus thing, we didn't know what that was going to mean. And probably, I don't know, 4 to 8 weeks after you and I were introduced, I think we started to get a sense that this was going to be really big. So once you and your team started to realize this was going to have some kind of real big impact for your business, for the sport, share with us a little bit about the messages that you were giving to your leadership team and to your people at TaylorMade at large.
John, thanks. Hopefully everybody can hear me loud and clear. I am in San Diego right now, so fortunately we're not dealing with the weather that you are, John, but it's good to see you again. And to you and Josh, just the introductions were incredible. I'm fairly certain I've never been called a rock star before because I have no musical inclination or talent whatsoever, but made me feel good. So thank you for that. And to all the other panelists, from Erica to Taylor to David, it's a pleasure to spend a little time with you as well. But more importantly, to all the alumni that are on this call, and I think there's some students as well, including, and I have to make this call out, John, before I answer your question, my niece, who happens to be a senior at the University of Connecticut, is on this call as well. So I'm thrilled that she's joining us today. So I've got a high standard to uphold here. Anyway, needless to say, for all of us, regardless of what walk of life, what profession, or what we're currently doing today, this pandemic has affected us all in many ways, some similarities and some differences. I do struggle with complacency in just about everything I do in my life, and both professionally and personally, much to my wife's dismay, as you could probably imagine, because I believe that innovation and creativity is a means toward advancement. And when we began to realize, TaylorMade began to realize with a little bit of insight, because we have a supply base in Asia and particularly in China, back in the fall of 2019, that there was a bit of what was called at the time an epidemic state. There was a virus that was affecting certain manufacturing facilities and assembly facilities. We were starting to see some absenteeism at some of our partnered facilities in the region. And while we're not solely in China, we're spread out throughout Asia in our manufacturing base, we started to get a bit concerned about the impact that this would have in the near term on the business. And at no point in time up until really January did we recognize that this would become something more global and then impact all of our lives, regardless of what walk of life, what business, or what you do every day. So as things started to develop, and I remember it was this past weekend last year, I was playing in a golf tournament up at Pebble Beach, the AT&T Pro-Am, which is one of my favorite weeks of the year. And I was standing next to the commissioner of the PGA Tour, a gentleman named Jay Monahan, who is also a New England native. And we were having a discussion about the migration of this virus and ultimately how it might impact not only the golf business, but importantly, golf entertainment as part of the golf business in tour events. And we knew then that things were going to start to ramp a bit. We didn't know the level of escalation, but we all started to put what we call crisis management plans in place if in the event this pandemic would ultimately impair our ability to operate our respective companies. So back to your original comment, John, about complacency and a paranoia I live with. We at our company, through our entire leadership team, not just in my role, but through our executive team and our management team in every corner of the world, we have 1,200 associates around the world. We work very diligently every day to advance the things that we do. And we don't settle on the things that have been done because we believe that settling or finding a rhythm that is consistent with what you did historically is a means for moving backwards, not forward. So when the pandemic started to evolve here and really started to become commonplace, and we knew that this would be a serious issue, when we started to see Western markets, the United States, Canada, the UK, and continental Europe literally shut down. Golf courses in our business were closed. Golf retail operations, who are our customers, were closed. Golfers, whether they're alumni golfers that play the game on this call or students that play the game, unfortunately, weren't going to be able to pick up their golf clubs, go to the golf course and play, regardless of the physical distancing capabilities that we now enjoy in our sport. So we immediately jumped to action here at the organization. I think the concept of innovation, the concept of creativity, but importantly, not relying on historical behaviors to be predictors of future requirements, was one of the greatest strengths that was deployed through our organization. So immediately, we prioritized two very specific initiatives in the organization. The first, which everybody on this call, I'm sure, can relate to, was the health and safety of our people. Number one. No matter what decisions we would make as we entered into the pandemic, every decision we would make would start and end with the health and safety of our people. So whether it was remote workforce, whether it was restricting travel, we're an international company, some of that was government regulated, some of that was internally processed, we would ensure that everything we did, and I'm sure the panel would agree with the same thing, that our health and safety of our people was priority number one. We implemented every health and safety practice we could possibly do and more. From buying PPE for our vendor partners, from implementing new health and safety standards, new cleaning requirements in our buildings when we were in our buildings, to restructuring the way we did our work outside of our buildings when we engage consumers, golfers, and customers alike. everything was retooled. And fortunately, because of the DNA of our company and our ability to react quickly, we were able to act upon that. But the second thing we decided to do that I think will go down in our 40-year history of one of the greatest movements in our organization was to align every individual in our organization that as we migrated through this pandemic, outside of the health and safety of our people, that our goal was to exit this pandemic as a brand, as a business, as a company, and importantly, as a group of people in a stronger position than we entered it. And so when you start thinking about where you're going to be in the future, you start planning and building initiatives and strategic ideas that would ultimately help you get there. The challenge with the pandemic, John, is no one had been through this before. And God willing, this is a once in 100-year situation for all of us. And I know all of us would love to believe that that be the case. But how do you build a plan around what is unknown? What assumptions you're going to deploy into your business plan? How do you think about advancing your company? How do you think about, enabling your workforce in new places? And where's the sport going to be when you do exit? There isn't an assumption that you can build in. So you scenario plan and you react and you move with quite a bit of fluidity. If I use the term fluid, 100 times a day, that would probably be 100 times fewer than I actually said it. But the situation was fluid, continues to be fluid, and we had to navigate through an ever-changing environment. The learning from all of this as we've migrated through the pandemic, and I'm not suggesting by any means we're out of it, but I do believe we're at the beginning of the end of this and getting closer and closer to something that will look more like normal. Fortunately for our industry has rebounded faster than most. And golf is not only one of the hottest sports on the planet, but it was the sport that first came back to public reality back in May when we launched an event with the PGA Tour called Tailor-Made Driving Relief, where we raised $6 or $7 million to support the CDC Foundation and the American Nurses Foundation to help those on the front lines that were fighting the pandemic every day. So that was part of our social responsibility as part of exiting better than we entered. But the learning that we really have applied to our business is our ability to make decisions quickly and our ability to react to scenarios or plan for scenarios, even if they're unforeseen, to ultimately determine how and when we will move and not be reactive to the overall marketplace or the competitive set or the environment we're dealing with. So when you hear companies talk about innovation, when you hear companies talk about creativity at the soul of its culture, that's what defines this organization. And fortunately, while again, we haven't completely exited this, our business has outperformed the marketplace. Our business has advanced relative to our competitors, and the TaylorMade brand is in a better position. Our people are in a better position, and our business is in the best position in the history of our 41 years. So the key learning that I'd like to share with all alumni or all students is, as you enter the things that you do every day, whether it's your academics or whether it's your professional ambition or in the role that you're in, if you lean back on the historical nature of the things that you've done as a means toward how you think you're going to win in the future, you're a step behind. And I would strongly encourage you to continue to think about what's next and how to apply your learnings to your future, as opposed to how to apply your past to what's coming. And that's really what has defined this organization completely. And I'm very, very proud of that. So it's nice to be able to talk a bit about that with you and the alumni and the students today.
It certainly has been a wild ride, and it's certainly great to watch. I guess it makes sense given everything we were just talking about. Taylor, I'm going to shift to you for a moment. And I had alluded to this when I was trying to make sure I didn't get too tongue-tied during all of the intros and bios. Man, has the NFL had a crazy year. Not what any of us would have expected. I just grew up in a football family. I love football, and now, of course, living in Texas, it is religion here, certainly. And in football season, it's an all-weekend thing. It's high school on Friday, it's D1 on Saturday, and it is the NFL on Sunday and Monday night. And really, I'm usually not a cynic, but I really just didn't think, in light of everything, that we would get through 16 games in a regular season, that we get to the Super Bowl, just given the nature even of the sport. But not only did the NFL pull it off, as we were talking about before we got started, the NFL did one step better. They really doubled down in a lot of different ways, because it's not just the players, all of the coaching staff, the folks like you in corporate, just the handful of attendees. The NFL's work in the last year actually altered the scientific community's understanding of the virus. I mean, I think it was, maybe you can correct me, I might be wrong on this, I think it was the league's chief medical officer who said something like, it turns out this thing doesn't cross the line of scrimmage. It wasn't really happening on the gridiron, but they learned other things that completely altered the way the research community looked at this thing, and they got through. And in the CDC, in fact, did a case study recently and published on what the NFL learned and has shared since with the public. But in your role, here you are, David Abeles was just talking about making decisions quickly. Well, from all the roles that I saw from your background, stuff that you've done, you're interacting with the media all the time. You're interacting with stakeholders, constituents all the time. Your business is about doing stuff really fast and just kind of figuring it all out. With all of the ebbs and flows and the wild ride of the season, in a time where media day looked more like this than what it ever did before, which was, usually more like Mardi Gras, I suppose. Talk a little bit about your year. Talk a little bit about the season, your season, as someone in comms for the NFL.
Sure. So we just completed our 101st season and really took that time to navigate it carefully and thoughtfully, jointly with the NFL Player Association, and really relying on the medical experts in the medical community, as well as government and state officials and the healthcare community. My season, as everyone else, really was about pivoting, adjusting on the fly, and as David said, not relying on what we've done in the past, knowing that in order to be successful in this environment, we need to be innovative. We need to try new things. Specifically with dealing with the media, we just completed Super Bowl, and that experience for me, we normally have 6,000 media members on site in the Super Bowl host city the week of and leading up to the game. And obviously this year, that is not the case. We had a sliver of media on site, but we were still expected to deliver a great experience to media locally, nationally, internationally, as if they were on site. And so you talked about media day. I did not sleep for days because I was so anxious and nervous. Media day, as you said, it's Mardi Gras. There are 40 press conferences going on at once with thousands of media in one room. This year, that was virtually. So and that was one of my main projects, built a virtual platform to host around 40 press conferences simultaneously. And again, I couldn't sleep, I promise you, because that was a nervous time. It needed to work. That meant we took a look at how do we build a platform that could hold 6,000 media members at once, delivering Zoom tech equipment to both Kansas City and Tampa Bay, and making sure that the right player was put at the right place at the right time, and doing that about 200 times throughout the week. Luckily, it went well. We received a lot of positive feedback from media, but the whole season, I think, is pivoting and really, this environment challenged us to create innovative ways to still engage the fans, engage media, make sure that the health and safety of players, coaches, personnel, and staff really were at the forefront of any decision we made, even if that meant adjusting our schedule or doing things with limited access. We were still really focused on the health and safety of all involved.
I'm sure you must have amazing stories, more so than we will ever get to here, but we have to get together and just have some conversations. I'm sure there's some good ones just for managing all of that. I know you had a lot of experience moving fast in the media environment on the fly, and no doubt it prepared you to get through the year in the way that you did, doing all the stuff that you did. I'm breaking out in hives just listening to what you were describing, all of those press conferences happening at once. I'm just trying to envision the grid of the planning grid and keeping all of that scheduling straight. I've done some event management, but nothing on a scale like you just were talking about. So kudos to you. And for those of us who've been able to enjoy the season, thank you so much. It's a perfect sort of lead in to Erica, some of your work. I mean, I know you're in a different spot in the media environment, but nonetheless, it's a space that I think a lot of people maybe presume they know a little bit about, and probably not as much as they like to think. I only know a handful of people in the media space, and depending on, mostly not in the sports world, mostly focused on other areas. But just for starters, to sort of like context set, the partnership arrangement that you currently work in is part of what defines what you and your team do. So could you just kind of give us the 101 on that first, and then I'll kind of go into my question.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. So yes, our relationship to manage the NCAA partnerships program is a joint venture together with Turner Sports and CBS Sports. And I think that it's definitely a very unique dynamic. I think that it was really formed, CBS has carried March Madness for years, and they were kind of a singular broadcast rights holder for quite a few years before we came into the mix. And what Turner Sports really brought to it was that that access to be able to carry all of the games throughout the tournament. So beforehand, where you could only watch one game at a time on, CBS Broadcast Network, now we brought in True TV, TNT, and TBS, which allows us to literally carry every single game of the tournament, no matter where you are in the country, no matter who you're following. So that was a huge part of it. And, to your point, it's very unique when you have two companies or networks or in any space who are traditionally would be competitors and would not necessarily want that kind of shared ownership over anything and everything that comes along with it. But through the creation of this joint venture, we brought a lot to the mix, and CBS obviously brought the power of the CBS Broadcast Network to allow for the best fan experience as possible. And that's really what I think we hang our hats on for this joint venture. I think that, through this relationship and this partnership that we've developed, we're going on, our deal currently goes through 2032. So we've got a long ways to go, which is wonderful. But we've created this partnership and this relationship just between the two of us, the two broadcast companies. And, aside from the fact that what I do day to day is managing the partners on the NCAA side, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it really has allowed us to put any of that competitive aside. And don't get me wrong, it definitely comes up in certain ways throughout the year, but when we're in it for the joint goal of delivering the best fan and viewer experience, it allows us to really create a partnership through this joint venture with CBS. And these last 2 years have been so crazy. You add in each of us having a pretty ginormous merger and or acquisition. So with CBS with Viacom and my company with AT&T to form Warner Media. I think that the base relationship that we've had has allowed us to navigate through even that process, which again has come with plenty of complexities, especially when you add to the mix that AT&T is actually one of our corporate champions of the NCAA. So there's a lot of nuances to it, but suffice to say, we've really created this amazing relationship, and we've been able to put differences and competition aside in the interest of delivering the best tournament for the fans.
Awesome, thanks. Forgive the, I'm going to break in for 1 second. We did not lose David. He just needed to step away for one quick sec. He sent a message my way, so he'll be back in a moment. But so now sort of moving into the question, or I guess really the follow-up that Eric, I had for you. I wanted to talk about that partnership a little bit, just because I think generally when folks are thinking about any career path, or there's certain paths that they're familiar with that they know, either just because of visibility or it kind of aligns with whatever major they may have, whatever. But being in the space as you've just described it, I mean, this is a pretty fast moving train normally. This is something that where change is, like constant change is the norm. Just when you kind of think you've got it figured out, it's going to shift. So whether it's like the merger and acquisition stuff that has just been in the space for a long, for decades now, it's kind of been the norm in the business. The shift to streaming and what that's done, I'm sure, to rights agreements and having to upend a lot of different things. And I mean, little did we know in the months leading up to COVID when we started seeing the legal cases moving forward as far as what the future may hold around compensation for student athletes, and so, that raises just all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, here's COVID, right? And like, oh, we're gonna play. Actually, we're not really gonna play a game day, and we're gonna prep for this championship. Just kidding, not gonna take place, at least not in the way that we had planned. It's got to be an especially unique challenge because. At least for the pros, right? Like that's their primary job. But when you're dealing with student athletes, they're managing in addition to their primary sport, which I admit governs so much of their. It's a unique type of student experience, but they are still student athletes, as the NCAA will remind us. There's got to be kind of a unique, almost kind of Olympic level of ability to pivot, adapt, and just have like general agility. So, I mean, just talk a little bit about the folks that are around you. I mean, not calling anyone out by name, but just the kinds of things that you're seeing that really kind of get noticed and that turn this into opportunities for folks professionally, because it takes a lot to make it and to be seen and in any environment, but maybe now more so than ever.
Yeah, you're completely right. And one thing I will say is the people that you feel the most for when, March Madness, the tournament was one of the first huge events to really be subject to that cancellation due to COVID. I think that the cancellation came, I want to say like 3 or 4 days before Selection Sunday. It was less than a week before the tournament was set to begin. Yeah. So you really do feel for, of course, the fans, and of course, my clients, our partners, who obviously spend a couple dollars to play in this space. But you really feel for the student athletes, and this, especially seniors, who this would have been really the culmination of their sports career. The phrase that everybody says is so many of the student athletes go pro in something besides their sport, and it really is true. But for so many kids, this is the highlight of their career, and to see them miss out on that was really unfortunate. But I think that, the way that the NCAA handled it with allowing people, to extend their eligibility or whatnot, they've been able to kind of work to deliver on that student athlete experience still, and do the best we collectively could to avoid them missing out as much as possible. But going to your question, I think that, David has said it, Taylor has said it, the name of the game really in any year in this sports industry and in most industries is just be prepared to adapt, be prepared to be flexible. The only thing that is guaranteed is that things are going to change. So you have to be, I mean, in order to be successful in this space, you have to be open to change. You have to be ready to flip on a dime. There are so many layers. Just in my job, I deal with, media, between media sales and media, added value, and linear and digital and social. And then we manage the corporate partnership program. So I work with legal, we do the negotiations, we manage the contracts, we work with finance, we work with accounting, like invoicing, payments, scheduling, like everything kind of really goes into the partnership space. And I would say that, when I was in, for those on this call who are students or kind of early on in their career, if you had told me that many years ago, I'm not going to say how many years ago, that this was where I was going to be. I knew I wanted to work in sports, and my major at UConn was in marketing. And I knew that I wanted to do something with that. But if you had told me that this was what I would be doing, I probably wouldn't have even known that this job existed at the time. So I think that you really have to be open and be flexible, and really just kind of put that tunnel vision away and just be completely open to opportunities. And I think that, the strength in creating and building and fostering a network is so crucial and so important to anybody in any industry, but especially in sports. I mean, I think everybody on the panel can agree that this industry is it seems big, but it's very little. You get those, less than 6 degrees of separation, and you know somebody who knows somebody who knows that person, and you never know who you're going to meet or where that next opportunity might come from. So I would say, the importance of just reaching out to people. I think LinkedIn is such a great resource, and you can search anybody and you can connect with people, and you can just, from an informational perspective, like, don't wait for the job to come available that interests you. Reach out to somebody who's in an industry or at an organization that you want to learn more about, and just connect with them. I feel like so many people, and I did this when I was coming up, and I do it so often for, people who are just starting out or people who are current students. I mean, we have an internship program, so I always try to make sure that I'm connecting with the interns and kind of giving them that, sage advice from somebody older who's been doing this for a few years and can help, help somebody navigate or help somebody make the connection that might, a couple years down the road, land them the job. You never know. All you really should do is, when you're going into an opportunity, treat it at, like, whether it's an internship, a 6-month-long internship, treat it as a 6-month-long informational job interview. Meet as many people as you can, really prove yourself, take it as your opportunity to be present, have that initiative, take ownership over your projects, and show that you're passionate and you're motivated. And you never know whose radar you might be on. And if you stay in touch and keep, so much of what I do and what all of us do is about fostering those relationships and having that be the foundation of which you build your success, really. I mean, I feel like you never know what somebody might be thinking of you for down the road. So I think that, specifically with what I do, having those great relationships with our partners has allowed us to do a little bit more creative thinking and pivoting. And, we're sitting here, it's February 17th. We're still waiting on, the local government in Indianapolis to tell us if and how many fans can attend the tournament this year. So obviously, for planning purposes, we're working with our corporate partners who have contractual deliverables to have some sort of presence throughout the tournament, and we don't know on site what that can be. It's allowed us to really have that creative thinking and work with teams and build, new opportunities through digital or through social or virtual or anything like that might be of interest, whether or not people can physically be there. Because I think, it kind of goes without saying at this point, obviously the health and safety of fans, student athletes, their families who are attending, like, everybody is the most critical piece. Nobody wants, the March Madness to be the next super spreader event. So I think that, keeping that first and foremost in our minds and figuring out what kind of, new and innovative ideas we might come up with. I think that, I feel fortunate to work at a company who really embraces, innovation and change, and is, so open to, different solutions for things. I think to your earlier point about, the traditional TV going to the streaming route and, cord cutting and all that stuff, that's a huge piece of what my company talks about overall. So we've been kind of a little, that's been part of the conversation even before COVID, is how are we dealing with cord cutting? How are we, what are the solutions to people still watching and still engaging and still participating? Yeah. And it's allowed us to kind of build these other platforms through over the top, through streaming, what have you. So it's allowed us to have kind of those access to those opportunities to pivot from some of the more traditional stuff that we would be doing in a normal year.
And I feel like there's so many right now, people sort of feel like, oh, well, I can't reach out to anybody because COVID, everybody's stuck at home. I can't do this, I can't do that. And I just feel like it's such a great time to do the stuff that you're talking about, right? Because, we're all dealing, most of what we deal with all day is problem solving. And because if it's something really that's that easy and that much of a sort of routine kind of stuff, I mean, there's always somebody else who can handle it. But as long as people reach out in a responsible and earnest way, if they're respectful of time, if they've done preparation and they're not kind of just asking stuff that they could have Googled, most folks, whether it's within the alumni network or even cold outreach to a stranger, most of us will do our best. We may not be able to get to everybody, but it's worth trying because I don't know, it's an island in most people's day, I think, from most of what comes to our desks. Typically, a friend of both Josh and mine, who's a very senior officer in the military, will tell you, like, even among the problems, the easier stuff will get handled at a much lower level. By the time it gets to my desk, it's all bad news, and often a lot of the choices aren't, they're between the lesser of evils. So when somebody wants to reach out for this kind of thing, it is just like a ray of light in the day, and I don't regret any of it. But I'm paraphrasing, but it's a good perspective. So thank you, David Shapiro. You've been really patient waiting, but it is now, of course, your time. You and I have chatted before, but at least in my line of work in helping people, there's two tracks of people I help. Some of it is more, performance and achievement based in the roles that they're in as they start to think about their next move. But volume wise, I spend more time helping people make changes and making career pivots than anything else. Sometimes it's just looking for their next thing, but usually it's in some way or other finding and taking themselves to market in new ways. And from where I sit, I get to see the unevenness of the kind of economic impact sector-wise of the COVID. I say economic suppression because it's not really anything organic, but rather something that we just needed to do in the interest of public health and of our team, our employees, our people. And it's interesting across my client base how different job searches are right now for the folks who are in, hospitality or in certain areas of sports and recreation or commercial real estate development for sure. And here we have Vail Resorts, and I realize that you're divided departmentally, division-wise in a specific way. But I mean, if I added like lifestyle brand and a handful of others that one might apply to a brand like Vail, I mean, in so many ways, y'all hit all of them, right? While granted, given that it's an outdoor sport and the nature of the sport, there's still a lot of, I think, opportunity there. When we spoke last year at the UConn Elevate event, one of the things that I think everybody felt come through you was the real energy and sincerity and passion around the human element of the people that you serve and the people who work there. So this has had to be a very interesting year, if I think across the organization, from an executive level planning effort, whether it's the people who are going from season to season that do the real hard work to just make the place go. And there's probably been on so many levels a need to not just pivot, but also an opportunity, because at your level, you're always kind of thinking, I hope, a few steps ahead, right? Your job is to be a little ahead of your skis. So I'm wondering in just what ways it's been an opportunity for people within the Vail Resorts organization to innovate a little bit and start thinking differently and saying, maybe we can do things differently. Maybe it would have been cool if we had made some of these changes earlier.
Yeah, thank you. First, thanks for having me here. This is wonderful, and what a treat to hear Taylor, Erica, and David speak. Just really fascinating stuff. I guess I'll start with picking up where David was talking about complacency. So in the fall of 19, I was speaking with my wife about, I'm feeling a little complacent. I'm feeling like, I don't really, I've been doing the same thing for 4 or 5 years. I think I'll raise my hand and see what else I could take on. And so in the fall of 2019, I took on a little group called Health and Safety, which is all the health and safety managers at our resorts. And a few months later, I didn't realize what I bit off when COVID hit. And so be careful of where complacency can take you. It can be a motivator and could walk you right into a storm, which it did for me. And I think you're right, John, the storm of COVID hit us in such a profound way, and impacted really every way conceivable in which we deliver our product. So it was March of 2020, and that's spring break for us. And on March 14th, I was planning on celebrating my 50th birthday that weekend with friends and family on the mountain. And instead, I spent 10 hours in an office building on that Saturday, resulting in us closing down 34 resorts across North America, which left literally tens of thousands of skiers with no place to ski and at our resort, having flown there, impacting our communities where we function, right? The local pizza guy doesn't have a customer if we shut down skiing. And then as the biggest player in the industry, everyone else followed suit quickly thereafter, and skiing was shut down. And so can't help but going to a pretty old quote about necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And so that really drove us to rethink the way we do business. And I'd say there were two driving forces for that. One was our culture, and one was focusing on the agility of our employees. And that's two things that we had been focusing on before COVID with our employees and with our organization. Never could we have imagined that it would be so important at the time of COVID. And our culture is one where people are just super passionate to be working for us. And I think, like my colleagues on this panel, right, people are jazzed to work for the NFL or the, TaylorMade, and they're psyched to be working in skiing. And our mission as our company is to create experiences of a lifetime. That's what we do. That's our business, is create experiences of a lifetime. And the rallying cry around that for our employees, drove people to really do heroic things, like so many people did in other areas, coupled with years of focus on learning agility as a leadership attribute, really identifying employees who had already been just demonstrating and exhibiting a great learning agility. And those two things, I think, coupled together, which I think my colleagues have also spoken about today, really allowed us to reimagine what we were doing. And so we have about, in 2019, I think we sold about 1.25 million passes for our resorts. We didn't know what we were going to sell for 2020, and we ended up selling almost 1.5 million passes for our resort. That doesn't include the day passes. This is pre-season people buying the Epic Pass, which you may have heard of, which gives you access to our resorts. But then who's going to buy that money? I mean, who's going to pay that money and want access to a resort if you don't even know it's going to be open in the COVID era? So we had to reimagine the way the product worked, what we were offering to people. And ultimately, the heart of it was a reservation system. And while in golf, you're accustomed to making a tee time and planning ahead, the ski community doesn't like that. They want to show up when there's snow and ski when they want to ski. And suddenly creating and imposing a reservation system when none existed was not only an IT technology feat, but also a really huge change management effort with our employees and with our guests. And while we got lots of feedback and criticism for doing this, ultimately, I think it was what enabled us to stay open most of this season and avoid a lot of the complications I think others have experienced in the industry. So we're sitting here now mid-February. We've had an amazing season. If you compare us to seasons past, yeah, our numbers are not where they are. We've put metrics out a month ago or so, and it's disappointing. But at the same time, it's way better than we ever could have imagined. And I was fortunately skiing a couple weeks ago with a family friend, and he got to the top of the lift. It was his first lift of the day. His face, under his mask, of course, lit up. You could see it in his eyes, just like, oh my God. This is something that I haven't done in a year. I haven't been around people. And the pride of seeing what we helped create for just not this one guy, but this guy's representative of the millions of skier visits we're having this season. It's not perfect, it's different. There are different elements, but unlocking innovation through culture and through agility, I think was really key and really fulfilling. So I think that the two key takeaways for me on the season and where we are is one, if we can get through COVID, I kind of feel like the superhero type of energy of like, well, heck, we can do anything. So bring it on, and we'll take care of it. And the second is a recommitment to the guest. I am not going to say specifics on this call right now, but super excited about how we can rechannel the COVID energy in a post-COVID world into innovation that will, I think, transform the guest experience in skiing in the future. So I think that getting through it, like any hard project, you get through it, you come through it stronger and as a better team. Yeah, it was a great,
Good advice.
experience.
Wonderful. We're going to just accelerate things a little bit because we want to make sure we get to everybody. And we also want to, most importantly, make sure we turn to the questions coming from the group. But so I see a few questions have started kind of trickling in, but to our attendees, to our audience, if you want to start thinking about your question or formulating it, putting it in there, we're going to get to as many as we can in just a couple of minutes. While we're doing that, David Abelies, I'm just turning to you real fast, thinking, it's sort of a play on what Erica was talking about and what David Shapiro was just talking about, but particularly from such a high-level executive position. This is a career panel after all. And folks are always trying to figure out how they ensure their visibility, whether it's virtually or otherwise, and demonstrate the kinds of things that get noticed. You are always very, very public, making time, for just about anybody with questions and career stuff within limits. What's the advice that you generally give to folks who are more junior in the profession about making sure that they kind of set themselves up in the right way to get noticed in the right way?
Yeah, John, I mean, different scenarios require different type of what I would call public or even private communication strategy. For me, I live by the basic principles of being present, being frequent, and then subsequently being relevant. And those are very important kind of fundamental pillars of any leadership approach to whether it's a pandemic or even just running the day-to-day operations of your business. And throughout COVID, and I know there's been a lot of discussion for obvious reasons around the response to COVID, how great leaders on this panels have reacted to COVID, what it has meant to their business. Ultimately, the red thread amongst all of us is the cultural uniqueness of each organization that prioritize people and engagement. And so, through COVID and even prior to COVID, we have a very clear people strategy here and communications platform in which we leverage in normal times and in abnormal times to continue to engage our people. And one of the metrics that we look at very closely is that engagement, which isn't simply you're communicating out, but what's the engagement model look like? What's the response coming back? And are you actually delivering against the curiosity, the questions, the uncertainty, or a clear pathway relative to the current state or future of your company? And so we spend a lot of time and effort ensuring that that's in place. And so, as you think of this in the context of, an employee in a workforce or a student that ultimately is working to the next jobs, being relevant, being frequent, and importantly, being relatable, authentic to who you are is important. That's what resonates from human being to human being. It isn't only the message, it's how the message is delivered. And we spend quite a bit of time focusing on that. You see that beyond our internal comms. For any of you that are golfers or are following TaylorMade on YouTube or follow our content creation capabilities with professional athletes like Tiger Woods or Rory McIlroy or Dustin Johnson, we had a very different approach over the course of the last 9 months because we didn't want to be tone deaf to what was going on in the world, even though more golfers were playing the game of golf than ever before once golf courses opened up in the aforementioned Western markets. So it's very important to know your audience, specifically in this case, right? Who are we talking to? Who are we engaging in? What's relevant to each of you, which is why I love the fact that we're migrating into Q&A so I can get a better perspective and answer a few questions that might come from those that are part of this panel.
Excellent. And I'm starting to see questions come in. Taylor, real fast for you, the kind of a similar question, but just from a different perspective. I know that you did a number of internships. There were a number of things that kind of helped increase your visibility. It's not easy to break in to a lot of areas in this business. A lot of people who want to work in this space, and it's really tough. So whether you just want to focus on either your like really early journey before that first full-time gig, or specifically about the experience you had at UConn, your UConn education that kind of just set you upright to be able to, do the rest on your own and make your way? I know that a lot of the questions that are already coming in and that are about to come in are going to fit that theme. So, your own truth here.
Sure. That actually is a great thing because those are both very intertwined. So while at UConn, I was a sport management major. I was on our cheerleading team and I worked in the men's basketball office. And I really feel that, the power of UConn and the network there really helped set me up for success post-graduation. I interned with the Boston Celtics and then did a few seasonal roles, both of the Cleveland Cavaliers and the NFL. And because of the relationships that I maintained and the work experience, the proven work experience that I had during those times, those both led to my first and second full-time roles back with the Boston Celtics after I completed my internship and back at the NFL full-time. So I think, Erica and David both talked about the importance of expanding your network. I would also add in the importance of maintaining relationships that you have. I think a common mistake is meeting someone and not taking the time to really cultivate and grow and nurture that relationship. And then 2 years later, when you could use that person as a resource, you haven't really invested your time or effort into that. And so I really think it's important at any level to not only expand your network, but maintain those relationships. And that's something that I wish I did a better job at. I'm quite happy where I am so far in my career, but I wish I did know it was okay to reach out to people more while in college and post college, and even now too. We all started out somewhere. So in this industry, it is so relationship driven. People are so open and happy to spend time meeting new people. It might not be tomorrow or the next week, but especially during COVID, we were all at home at some point. So really do take the time to nurture your network in addition to growing it.
A consistent theme. Thanks a bunch. And just a reminder to folks, all of the people on this panel who are really busy, their time's incredibly valuable. Hopefully they like me. I'm a nice guy, but they're not here for me. They are here for you because they want to be available to you as a resource, everything from just advice to maybe answering those questions that you don't quite know where to send. So I'm just going to encourage all of you to, if there is a question that you have, or if you don't feel comfortable putting it out to everybody, you can, just submit it privately if that's your preference, and we can frame it for you in whatever way is appropriate. But that's what really lights these folks up, and that's what they're here for. So I'm going to hope that even though we won't get to all of them, that I start to see that chat window really light up. But the first question I'm going to throw out there, and I realize at first we may end up talking over each other for a sec, but just to the panel, one of the questions that came in a while ago is, well, there's a path for folks who followed, like Taylor and Erica, who did initially internships and got certain visibility very early career. When people are doing career changes, they're reapplying real core skills and they're making a pivot, whether you call it like a returnship or adult internship, anything that's in the spirit of getting somebody who could be outstanding talent into your organization who just didn't follow that linear path. Is there either anything like that or an alternative to it that would be great for somebody who's facing that kind of situation and wants to make that kind of shift?
I can jump in. We don't have returnships in that sense, but I would also say there's such value in diversity of thought, and that just because you haven't started through the sport industry path, that doesn't mean there's not a place for you. If anything, that's bringing in new perspectives, new ideas. It's definitely welcomed at the NFL, and I've in my personal experience, it's been welcomed in other companies that I've worked for as well. So I wouldn't let not having that sport business industry experience as of now prevent you from reaching out to somebody or applying for a role in this industry.
If I can add to that, I 100% agree with everything Taylor said. I think that one of the other things to keep in mind as well is a lot of people associate sports business with being a sports fan, and there's a huge difference. I mean, I would say, not to take away the fun of it, because I think we would all argue our jobs are super fun. I love my job. I love to do what I do every day, but it's a business first. And I think that no matter what background you're bringing into it, if you are motivated, if you're open to learning new things, because no matter, even if you're coming from the industry, when you're in a new role, you're going to have to learn, you're going to have to, be willing to adapt and kind of get up to speed quickly. But I think that, to Taylor's point, bringing in kind of a different background, difference of thought, and another perspective is always helpful. I would say, specifically on my team, one of the biggest rock stars in our group came from a publishing background. So you don't have to be, a sporty, as they say. Like, you don't have to have the stats and the background and know every every player from every team and every stat and every coach and all. Like, it's not about that. You can be the biggest fan, and that's great as long as you're passionate about what you're doing. But if you have that business first mentality and you're willing to bring your your perspective and your strengths into the position, to Taylor's point, you don't have to have that sports business background at all. And sometimes it's better not to be honest.
Great. There's a question somebody sent me privately, and I'm directing it to all of you, but David Abelese first. Somebody, I'm kind of paraphrasing here in the interest of time, but basically saying, look, I don't know that I would feel just comfortable reaching out to any executive, right? The sense that there's so much that's coming your way, let alone a CEO, which David Abelese is why I'm kicking to you first. You had talked a few minutes ago, obviously, about the information being authentic and relevant and so forth, broadly, but you can't respond to everybody, right? But somebody reaches out to you or to anybody else, what advice would you give to someone who has a question like that, saying, hey, how would I get that person's attention and willingness to help me to kind of break through, such that they'd be willing to respond and spot me a few minutes?
Yeah, John, I think it's interesting. I think different CEOs and leaders in different organizations approach your question in their own unique way. This may be shocking to many of you, but I actually respond to every consumer email and every inquiry that comes into my inbox every day. I've made that part of the notion of what I do, so that I can live by the rules of engagement that we prescribe within our organization, which is contact first, engagement as a priority. So I do think that in some regards, you may find an organization where you have an executive that responds to you. In other regards, there's structure within organizations, human resource departments, different hiring functions, recruiting functions that ultimately, if they're run well, and if the company is run well, they will want to hear from you and about you. Great organizations look for, and I think this is one of the threads that came up in Taylor's comment and Erica's comment, we are looking for diversity. And I don't just mean ethnic diversity or gender diversity, diversity in terms of thinking. Yes. And new thinking. So one of the things that I would recommend to everybody is, as you pursue a new concept in your professional career, as you pursue life after university, whatever that might be, it's very important that you define, one, what you're passionate about. We call it your power alley heel. What are you passionate about? And ultimately, where can you truly add value because you're powerful in that space? So that's number one. That's a point of difference. And you need to be able to accentuate that point of difference in a way that helps you stand out, number one. And number two, a willingness to learn, right? And recognize that regardless of where you are in your career, you bring your background at whatever level that background is. You've defined what your power alley is, or we have fun here. One question I ask of every employee that I interview here, every employee is, what's your superpower? What is your superpower? Tell me what you are so uniquely different at. What is the point of difference that you bring to the table to help our organization become the great organization that we aspire to be? So as you migrate through this question and into the practical nature of engagement with executives or recruiters or HR teams, be prepared to talk about what your power alley is or what your superpower is. And the diverse way in which you approach your thinking or the nature of what you're pursuing, and that will help you stand out. I do agree with the balance of the panel that said, hey, networking is very important. It absolutely is, because it gives at times deeper, more committed and validated insights to potential candidates, right? If I have a lot of faith in our CFO and we're hiring for a director of commercial finance, and someone reaches out to validate a candidate's proposal to be part of a recruiting process, that's certainly important to us because we have value in those that have recognized the talent in advance of it. So absolutely networking, define your superpower, your power alley, make sure you exploit in a good way the diverse nature in how you think, and ultimately, demonstrate your creativity and willingness to learn. You do those 4 things, I'll hire you tomorrow.
30 to 45 seconds. Other responses in addition to David's? No, we're good. Yeah. Oh, good. Another question from for the entire panel. COVID has reshaped the industry for the better. What are some departments or teams that you believe are going to grow or expand as we come out of the pandemic restrictions?
It's a great question, John. Is that to the entire panel?
It is to the entire panel.
Okay. Well, listen, I've never been shy.
You'd like to start.
So
Jump right in.
A bit of a pause there. So I'll lead in, but I'll keep it brief. Everything digital. Absolutely everything digital in terms of how we think about, true and material investments, both in CapEx and in people, as it relates to broader and more definitive engagement and interaction with our customer. So without question, as we think about our marketing functions and our digital functions, certainly in a business like ours, we're a consumer business in a highly specialized category, which is golf. We're just an authentic golf company. That's what we do. So when we think about what we've learned coming through this areas of investment moving forward, we have recognized our ability to communicate and create value in front of golfers on behalf of our brand, our products, our athletes, and our services. So as a net result, that's really where we're going. The other thing that we're kind of divesting of, and this is not probably new to anybody, either that's on the panel or in the group, is we're taking a hard look at heavy fixed costs, overhead, and infrastructure that may not be required in the future to help enhance our profitability and ultimately reinvest in the initiatives that matter. So I'm right now, sadly, I'm in a building all by myself because California governance doesn't allow us to be back if we're non-essential in our workplace. We've got 200,000 square feet of space here, and we're fully functional. Where we typically have 600 people in the building, we literally have 6 people in the building right now. And the organization is functioning well. Now, we certainly miss the human nature, the contact points that we've all talked about. So we're going to have to solve for that. But all organizations and prudent leaders right now are thinking about, the learnings they can apply to advance their company and things that they can jettison that they've learned through this that won't.
I would say internal communications. I think over the past year, there have been so many, whether it's the pandemic or some of the social justice events that took place over the past year as well. The importance of keeping your employees informed, educated, up to date, feeling safe and secure, and putting your people first. I think that's not going away, and hopefully it doesn't. And I hope that companies continue to invest in those departments specifically.
One of the questions that I get a lot, and it's one that has come in a couple of different variations here, is for the person making that career pivot. We talked about the sort of returnship or maybe adult internship kind of thing specifically, but more broadly, there are a lot of people a lot of the changes that we're seeing in the job market, in the labor market, they're permanent. In some ways, business is going to change. The way business gets done is going to change, whether it's, because of work from home or other things, industries that are just going to need different talents. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe mid-career and making a real shift and wanting to break into either your company, your area, your discipline? Beyond, we've always talked about the importance of relationships. We've already talked about networking. We've talked about a couple of different things, themes consistently, but anything that's just specifically actionable that you would suggest for someone who's pivoting from, especially an industry that's been hit really hard, whether it's from the retail space or the hospitality space or anything from that, for any of those worlds that are likely to experience either a longer term or a more permanent shift. Again, open to all.
Yeah, I'll take initial cut at it of think aggressively and creatively. I think to weave 2 points together, Erica had said earlier about, you don't know where your career path's going to take you. And so think outside the box of what are the possibilities. We've talked about passion a few times. So what could you be passionate about? If you're going to work for, our companies are relatively easy to be passionate about, but maybe you work for a widget company and you could be passionate about that, but find that passion and chase it and use your superpower that David was talking about to get your foot in the door. And so for me, I'll just give as a quick example, I'm historically a healthcare fraud and abuse lawyer. I was a prosecutor prosecuting healthcare fraud cases. What does that have to do with skiing? I didn't even ski until 10 years ago. But my first interview with my CEO, I just came out and owned it and said, yeah, if you want the traditional GC who has this certain kind of resume, that's not me, but let me tell you what I can do for you and why that might work for your company. And, it worked out. It doesn't always work out, but it did work out. And so I think coupling your passion with what your superpower is and thinking aggressively of where you could be, anything's possible.
Awesome. Others on that same question, the career pivot, right? Someone moving from maybe another space, especially if they're mid-career.
I would also just add, on top of all of the things that have already been said, network, never feel like you're annoying somebody by reaching out. The worst that happens is they don't respond, and then you can just reach out to somebody else who will. But I think on top of all of that stuff like this right now, this is a virtual panel where you can hear from, I'm hearing from different people in the industry who I would have not connected with otherwise, but I plan on keeping in touch with all of these guys, and I hope people who are participating, on the panel and listening along will reach out. I'm always happy to grow my network, and that's really what this is all about. I think that's been the consistent theme. I think that especially right now when all of these things are happening virtually and it's pretty easy to join and participate, just keep searching for this stuff and join, and you never know, again, to the earlier theme, you never know who you're going to hear from, who might just kind of strike a little buzz in your brain that makes you want to learn more or connect with somebody new. So these are great.
I agree 100%. This was another one that had come to me, and sorry, David Shapiro, to turn back to you so quickly, but it's more really directed to you with so much of this impact being. I had mentioned hospitality as one example. Where do you see really the industry going from here? Hospitality largely. If you want to obviously speak primarily about Vail, that's up to you. But people are eager to get out of their houses and go do stuff. And as an industry, there are, of course, a lot of conversations. It depends on which area of hospitality you're in. But just as an observer of the market and high-level conversations, where do you see that kind of those kind of shifts going longer term, so we get people back to enjoying those services again, but also the viability of the hospitality space again?
Yeah, I think it's going to come roaring back. I think there's so much pent-up demand to get out there and recreate and engage with people that there's going to be great opportunities. I think the big change will be in the engagement with the guest. And so when you were talking before about areas of potential growth, right, that just to go back to what people said already, it is IT and it is marketing and HR, I think, but the IT is the hub, and how are you unlocking data and different types of channels of communication to reach to your employee base and to reach to your customer base. So Yeah, I think there's real opportunity there on all levels, and I think I'm looking forward to it. Personally, I'm looking, professionally aside, I can't wait to go travel.
This is a question that also had come in privately to me. I'm going to start with David Abelese, but it's kind of for everybody, but there's some specific thing I'm thinking of. The question that came in is about the nature in which the last year has altered relationships, professional relationships in a number of ways. David Abelese, the reason I'm turning to you first is the nature of your work as the CEO of TaylorMade, right? There are celebrity athletes who are using TaylorMade and who serve in sponsorship roles or whatever, but there's a very human element to all of those things. People keep talking about the importance of relationships and networking. Is there anything that you just see differently about a lot of those things that, I don't know, consider it, whether you want to consider it sort of a lesson from the last year or just things that you might just look at through a different lens, different paradigm?
It's a really good question. I think it's applicable not just to a company like ours, but I think probably to everybody on the panel and everybody within this call right now. That's been the most difficult part for us as a company and for me as an individual. I typically spend 120 to 130 nights on the road each year, and the large majority of my time is engaging with our teams in different areas around the world. And that personal engagement, that relational development, the equity that is built over time when you're sitting across from someone in a meeting, in a conference room, at dinner, on the golf course, wherever that might be, is invaluable, in my opinion, to the long-term sustainable requirements of a business like ours. It may be different in other industries. It may be different in different capacity. So that's been the hardest thing on me personally and the hardest thing on our organization, because we tend to find it more effective to ideate and create when you're together in an environment that's safe, that enables you to do that, than through a virtual interaction like this. I'll give you an example, John. I would much rather be on a panel in front of all of the alumni and students right now than doing this virtually. I'm thrilled that we can do this virtually because at some level we can add value, but I can't see the response to anybody's comments on the face of anybody else. So that interpersonal connectivity, the relational equity that gets developed there, at times can be diminished. But I do think the conversation we had about 30 minutes ago is very relevant. We've taken action to increase our frequency, to build out our communications platforms more comprehensively. We've gotten creative in terms of within state or county or federal guidelines, how we can come together and where we come together in such a way that at least you're connecting tissue in a way that's meaningful for your organization. So what our takeaway will be is a more improved, more efficient, more proactive and productive balance of the use of technology for the sake of productivity and how we value our time when we do engage. And I think most would say this, do not take that for granted moving forward. Do not waste time when you're with an individual. Be engaged, be thoroughly, connective, because I think we can all relate to the fact that when you're not, this is a difficult time to live through. This is not easy. Personally or professionally. So I look forward to applying those principles to how we think in the future. And as I've said to our organization time and time again, the next great day in our company isn't simply the next great driver that we sell or the next major champion that we crown. It's the day that we all get to walk back into our workspace and see each other again. And we're preparing for that.
Before I let you escape and I let other panelists respond to this question, there's, in addition to, close colleagues, your executive team, the celebrity names like the Tigers of the world, right? I mean, one of the things that I remember, I forget which interviewer it was saying about you last year, it was an observation I think he had kind of from walking around, that just about everybody in your company by name. I mean, the sort of like management by walking around philosophy. In what ways are you, right now at least, while we're having to do this and because of the rules in California or elsewhere, engaging your team? Because this isn't perfect, this isn't ideal. We weren't evolved to interact with one another through a smooth shield of glass. So what are they getting from you? What are you trying to just deliver from them differently? So kind of a variation on that same theme.
At the beginning of this pandemic, I think everyone thought Teams calls or Zoom calls or whatever technology you're using was this really cool novelty that I can engage with this and do this, and this is fantastic. And quite frankly, if I didn't have to have another Zoom call for the next 12 months, I'd be just fine with it. But I think we've beyond some of the communication strategies that I've talked about and outlined before. It's been challenging when you think about, we've hired about 65 people since the start of the pandemic, of which I've never personally, other than virtually, met any one of them. So once I kind of navigated through the first few months of this, and our executive team did, and our senior managers did, we started to learn from what we were accomplishing or weren't accomplishing, and started to apply new concepts to deeper engagement, even if it would be virtually. One of the things I do every day, I tend to get up pretty early in the morning to deal with our European businesses, and late at night with our Asian businesses. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't have a hit list of 7, 8, 9 employees in different areas around the world that haven't heard from me or seen me, much to their dismay. When my phone call comes in, I get a bit concerned that they're concerned that I'm calling, but I am calling people all over the world every day just to see how they're doing and checking in on how their work is progressing.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that.
So, again, I think anyone that's going to stand in front of this esteemed group or any group and suggest that, this is the most effective way to run companies in the future, regardless of what you do, would be lying to you. But you do start to deploy more interpersonal engagements, whether it's making phone calls, more frequency, more video work, and within the health and safety standards of what we're capable of doing. I'm going to get on a plane as quickly as I can, and the first thing I'm going to do is go visit everybody. So I take a lot of pride in that. We're a big organization with a very small company culture. It's part of what's special about this place, and we'll be relentless in pursuing that as one of our top priorities.
Sure. Great. I'm actually just going to shift to one other question. I know I said I was going to give this to the rest of the panel, but I'm looking at the clock. We're almost out of time, I know, and I knew we wouldn't be able to get to every question, but this is one, as I've just been scrolling through, I think it's a good one to get back to. First, thanking the panel. But one of our attendees is saying, hailing from Boston here, and therefore a big Tom Brady fan, great name, of course. But what advice might you have for someone looking to transition into sports, especially as a woman in a male-dominated industry? How can you stand out, especially with the oversaturation of demand for jobs? And that's open to anyone on the panel.
I would, for me, at the NFL, we're a department of 30, and half are actually women in NFL's PR department, and that's ranging from the assistant level all the way to the senior vice president level. So I think there are a lot of strides needed to be taken in terms of diversity across the board, but there are so many women in these roles, and not only in the industry, but like leading in their respective areas. So I would trust that you have a place in this industry and a place to lead, and really just trust yourself. You're not alone. And, I've been lucky to have a lot of advocates, both men and women, across this industry, but specifically within the NFL building, who are investing in my journey and trust me and know that I'm capable of handling this role regardless of my gender. So just trust yourself and don't. It's hard to second guess yourself. I do it all the time, but just know that you're not alone, and there really is a place for you to be a leader in this industry.
Other responses, same question before we do a couple of wrap-up things?
Yeah, I would agree with Taylor, as always. I feel like I agree with everything she says. But yeah. I think also, going back to the networking thing, there are actually groups and networks that you can join that are specific to women in the sports industry or anything like that. So I would seek out those types of groups as well to just, kind of, I know it's sometimes hard to really believe that's how it is, but to Taylor's point, it really is. And I think that as well, I know there's entire separate panels focusing on diversity and inclusion and social justice and everything, but I think that you'll see that so many of these companies, big and small within the industry, are dedicating resources and giving that commitment to improve their diversity and inclusion. And this is, again, across the board, from entry level all the way up through leadership. So I think that, now's the time. I think that, there's no reason why being a woman in this industry should hold you back in any way or anything, you know, no matter where you hail from or who you are or, you know, how you identify. You know, now's the time. I think that the openness and the inclusion is I want to say in the sports industry might be even better than some others because of the dedication and because of the diversity that's already there and the dedication to growing that.
And these are battles that, you know, we all will need to know, no matter where we sit, that we need to remain aware of thinking outside of ourselves, our own individual experience, and thinking that we know it all, and just always keep evolving in whatever way. Josh, before I turn it to you to close, we are at time. Just administratively, I realized that my chat window was working, but part of the Q&A was, I guess, stuck at one point, and then I refreshed and I got to see a lot of stuff at that point. And there are a few questions that are either directed to individual members of our panel or things that we didn't get to as a result. So we can just capture a screenshot of that if the recording doesn't capture the Q&A, and we can make sure to share those afterwards. That would be great, because again, these folks they're here for the alums, not just for the chat time. And I'm going to let you take it from here.
Well, I appreciate that, John. Yeah, just copied and pasted it while you were saying that, and we have the ability to download it again, so it's no worries. Huge thanks to the panelists. Many of you have been actually writing individual responses back to our folks, knowing that we weren't going to be able to get back to all these questions. So much appreciated there, and I know that they're appreciating the personal touch there as well. So thank you for doing that. Huge thanks to all of you for joining us. I realize that this is, as we talked about, just different times. Normally, as we talked about, we'd all be getting together, whether that's out in San Diego, in New York, in Colorado, and in outside Atlanta, or in Texas. We'd all be getting together, spending some time together. But the one thing that kept resonating with me, number one, when I'm looking for help running an event, I'm going to call Taylor, because clearly she figured out how to get 200 different things happening across the board. When I need a new golf set, I'm calling David. When I'm ready to ski, I'm going to call David. And when I'm ready to get my front row seats to the next Final Four that UConn will be playing in, I'm calling Erica. So clearly we all have our ways to make this thing work. But the biggest message that did come out of all of this, folks, is that every single person on this panel basically indicated being a part of UConn Nation opens a door to somebody else and their connections that you can tap into and get information and insight and expertise. We had an hour and a half to talk. Clearly there's much more that these folks are aware of and what they can share. John said it at the outset, all of these folks are willing to have conversations with all of you on an individual basis, answer some questions. So what we will do, we will take these questions that obviously weren't answered today, but the majority of them had LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to them. If you have specific questions or want to be connected, all of them have offered for me to facilitate an individual connection to you, to their work, email communication, so you can make sure that we stay in touch with them. And answer any of those follow-ups. Just give them time. They all are doing very important work, so they don't get back to you within 24 hours. Very good chance they will get back to you soon thereafter. So feel free. You all have my email from all the communications and marketing and everything else from registration. So send me a note with your specific question or who you want to be connected to, and we'll make that happen for you. To John, thank you so much for joining us in the ice cold igloo that is Texas these days. Hopefully power will stay on for you. To David in Denver, David in San Diego, Taylor in New York, and Erica in Georgia, thank you all so much for taking some time and sharing your expertise. UConn Nation's better because all of you are willing to share and be rock stars again, as we talked about in this environment. And to all of you that joined us, really quickly, there are a couple more of our Elevate sessions still yet to occur. We have one next week, 2/25, February 25th, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. We are doing the intersection of technology intersection of technology and automated systems. So you can definitely get a chance to understand a little bit more there. Law will be involved, business operations, we're talking about automated systems, smart tech, those type of things. And then we have another one, like we mentioned, with John Brady and our career development office in March 2nd, talking about resume tune-ups, no matter where you are in your career. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities. Again, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our panelists. We'll let you get back to your regular scheduled days. So thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.